Great. Hello, everyone. This is Jason Averbook, CEO and co-founder of LeapGen. Great to be with you today. This is a session that we're doing in conjunction with HR Executive Magazine and Paychex, really discussing the world of HR technology today and really focusing on the right technology to help us in the moment that we live in. I am honored to be joined today by James Kirchhoff. James, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Good to see you. And Dr. Thela Thatch, how are you, Thela?
I'm great. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. So great to have you guys here. So we know that in the HR tech space, we're living in fascinating times. Well, not just in the HR tech space, all around us, we're living in fascinating times. And James and Thela were talking about some of those fascinating times of working in a distributed model, having our businesses change, having our lives change, and trying to manage all of that change at the same time. And really what we wanted to do today is deal with questions. And for those of you here, I'd love for you just to say in the chat, hi. Hopefully we'll get some responses there. And in the comments, please feel free to go ahead and put some comments in. We're going to deal with, we're going to start with a few questions that we've kind of framed, and then going from there, we're actually going to open it up to some audience questions around HR technology as well. So I'd like to start, if I could, with the first question. I'm going to start with James and then go on to Thela. And the first question is, what emerging trends in HR technology are you seeing, due to the pandemic? And James, I've been talking about pandemic as both, the social health pandemic as well as some of the social justice pandemics out there, which is just lots of change all over the place. But would love your thoughts on what are those emerging trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, no, it's a really great way to think about it, right? With the two separate pandemics. So I think we should tackle both of those today, but let's talk about employment and technology and what do we see? So by no surprise, right, we're on a video conference now, but live streaming and meetings has really taken the world by storm because it had to, right? Zoom in one day had 330 million users in a single day. Another day in April had 2.5 million app downloads, right? So super important, especially with the distributed workforce. At Paychex, we've done some surveys, several surveys actually, and people that had gone home during the lockdown and worked remotely has stayed to remote right now. So about 40% from our data, and there's also data out there that shows it up to 60%. Also, Paychex are also all working remotely. And as you referenced, we were talking about the challenges today, right? I have 3 kids, 9, 7, and 2, trying to make time to do virtual teacher, but also my job, right? So I'm not the only one. That's not unique by any means right now. So it will be interesting as we work through the pandemic. Hopefully the vaccine is here soon and, we'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think people are going to expect flexible hours moving forward. I'm able to do my job, but, I say I sleep at work. I'm not working from home, which is a totally different shift if you think about it, right? I wake up and I start working, but I'm also taking care of my children at the same time. So I think flexible hours is going to be here to stay, working remote. I fully expect in the same survey results, many of the employees don't expect to see all their employees come back as well. I think they'll need to do that to retain that talent as well. So if we change that strategy, I think people will try to find work elsewhere. So there's several other ones, but I did want to, Thela, get your perspective on this before I chat our entire time here. So what are you seeing?
Oh, that was great information. So one of the things that was discussed is the fact that there surprisingly is a rise in the amount of investment that businesses are putting into their organizations. And so they're actually increasing their budgets because of the need to manage data, to hire more employees. And they're focusing on technology, they're focusing on benefits, recruitment, and employee engagement. And like you said, it's no surprise, we have virtual meetings every day. And so some of the things that I'm seeing, especially in my role as an HR coach, is this need to document and to capture data around attendance, data around employee issues, documentation back and forth between employees who are going out on leave. So there's this rush, like kind of a mad rush, to make sure they're documenting properly and passing data between employer and employer correctly and confidentially. So the need for cloud technology, the need for verification tools, the need just for understanding what can be shared and what appropriate methods they can use to share them has just been a big topic of conversation.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And sorry, James, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna tag on to that a little bit. Like in our technology, not, DocuSign, for example, right? They've had a huge increase as well, 200%. So what we're seeing in our business is that e-signature products really have actually gone through the roof from a utilization due to people not coming into the office, but also social distancing, right? And also the documentation from mandates on health questionnaires before you enter a workplace, if you are going to return to work, right? So we've seen a lot of those emerging to meet different legislation, federally and state. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, that's great. And I think that, when you think about the concept of technology playing a role in this, where have you seen most customers today? I mean, did you see they were ready for this, or did you see they had to scramble really, really quickly, when the pandemic hit? I mean, we're 9 months into this now. Where would you say most people are? Are they ready now, or do you still see a lot of scrambling, I guess is the best way to say it, to try to catch up?
Yeah, so I'll start, I guess, here. So yes, all of the above. So some were definitely more well-positioned to deal with this than others. The good news is, though, you look at Zoom and DocuSign 2003 and Paychex, right? We started investing in these virtual HR tools years ago. So the technology was there. And if you think about it, think about the consequences if we did not have that technology that employers are already using. That it would have been a lot worse from an economy perspective. And it's not just like employers that had to go virtual, right? I was taking doctor appointments virtually. It allowed those businesses to stay functioning. Our whole culture, right, and everything was functioning around what I consider HR technology that was meant for employers. So I think everyone was at least aware, and the technology was there to support it. But some organizations never made that investment until now when they had to. They may have had access and awareness, but they had to scramble to stand up things, right? Especially when the government's changing literally things daily on you. They're scrambling for those resources and how they're going to meet those needs. Thela, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Some of the experiences that I've been having, especially since March and on to, the present, with all the different issues we're experiencing in the world, is pretty much forced employers to be more disciplined, to be more consistent in how they document. So a lot of, as you mentioned, employers and different organizations had these tools, but they were kind of hidden in their toolbox. They weren't using them as regularly. So they may have had a time and attendance system that they never even used, or, they may have had some methods in place that now they're being kind of forced to use in order to keep track of their employees that they weren't really using before. So this is a great opportunity for, me as a consultant, as a coach, and the consultants I work with to really help them pull those tools out. Some of the software that they already had that may have been a part of an existing package that they've already purchased that they never really used. They never even knew that, they may have had an EAP plan that had a self-service function, right? So things like that now they're using all the time because they need that self-service function. They need to activate that. So that's what I've been seeing. There's a lot of activation of things that literally Paychex and the consultants I work with have been talking about for years, trying to get HR leaders and business leaders to streamline their processes using technology. So now we are being pushed to do that as HR people because things are moving so fast. We need to be organized. We need to be able to find documentation and make sure that documentation is handled in a confidential, secure way. So those are some of the trends I'm seeing. And it's almost like playing catch up to what was already there. Because like it was mentioned, it's been here. It's not like we've created new technology. It's now we're using the technology.
Yeah, no, Thela, it's a great comment. And I think, one of the things I always talk about is that, we started talking about this at the end of Y2K, and all of us waiting for this thing called Workforce 2020, and all of a sudden Workforce 2020 hit us and we weren't necessarily ready for it. We're not ready for this distributed world of work. And I guess that leads us to the next question. And Thela, maybe we can start with you is, in a distributed world, in a distributed workforce where we have people working all over the place, and it's not coming to the office and the manager leader saying hi to them every day. What are some tips as to how to best drive engagement and culture, in that distributed model?
That's a great question. I recently presented a few weeks ago at the Garden State, New Jersey SHRM on managing virtual teams. And we talked about how to manage teams through COVID and beyond. And some of the principles that we discussed around good virtual management were the 4 C's. So we talked about clarity, setting goals and expectations, consistency, best practices for the virtual process, and establishing a consistent work routine. We talked about connectivity, connecting teams and members through the use of technology. And we talked about culture, which is transferring your company's values to the virtual space. So there's a great Works article too that we have on the Paychex site. It's titled Strategies for Managing Remote Employees. And in the article, we talk about some of the same things. But to me, when I was doing the presentation, what constantly resonated was the need for consistency and, number one, communication, which actually would be a 5C. But communication is really the biggest issue when I'm dealing with clients daily, with the consultants I work with. Every day, there's a gap in communication. And was this communicated? How was it communicated? So making sure employers and employees are connected in terms of what are your common goals? What's the expectations? And so I hope that answered the question. So clarity, consistency, connectivity, culture, and communication kind of is the umbrella for all of that. And it sounds simple, but it really isn't. It's a lot of work.
No, that's a lot. And I'm going to get back to you in a second because I want to understand from you how many managers and leaders do you think have that, in their skill set. But James, do you want to add anything, to what Thela just threw out there?
Yeah, actually, as she was talking through that, it actually dawned on me with the 5th C, communication and the tools that are out there, right? So there are so many tools out there. So you have to be conscious that you're not over implementing, because if you over implement, then you have too many means of communication, which ultimately is going to leave you down a path of not being consistent. So your messages are going to be lost or mixed. So, that's where, from a Paychex perspective, we're trying to put as much of that into a single platform as possible to drive consistency as it relates to HR type situations, right? So we've been seeing some emergence of like HR case management. So that's a platform for employees to communicate back to HR professionals without having to pick up the phone, right? We all know that the younger workforce, which is now the majority, doesn't want to pick up the phone and talk to someone. They want to be able to communicate, on their mobile device, but also, how can we bring all these different communication methods to a single platform to allow our HR professionals to be more productive? Because you're going from getting someone submitting a case to saying I got paid incorrectly to actually looking and correcting that within the system and communicating back through a single application to setting up one-on-ones or collaborating with a partner, right? So as much as you can bring into a single platform, I think the better, so that you don't end up with mixed messages, which ultimately will lower engagement of the staff.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. And in theory, just as I promised, I wanted to get back to you on, how many people do you think are ready for that? Because, well, I think, James, the concept of the technology being there is important. I'm always curious as to how many managers are really ready to work, you know what I mean, to actually use communication and to use some of these tools. So I'd love your thoughts on that, Thela, if you could.
Yes. So I will preface that question by saying I've been doing human resources. I've been working in human resources for over 25 years. I started as an HR coordinator. And of course, now I'm an HR coach and consultant with Paychex. And I have to say, this year and in my 20 years, managers are almost never ready. They are reacting to something that is happening in their environment and not being proactive. So if you wanted a percentage, I would, on a nice day, I would say 20% are ready and 80% are not ready. And that's just if we had to use the 80-20 rule. So that's what I see every day. I deal with consultants who work with clients every day. And this is a constant conversation every day around, especially around managing leaves of absences, managing terminations, managing things that don't happen every day. And that's when these activities happen, that's when you see the gaps. That's when you see they don't have a documentation process. That's when you see they don't have self-service software or any, software like a Paychex Flex to manage performance management that would help them to determine if someone really should be terminated, right? So it creates this whole spiral of information that's missing. And that's what I see literally every day. So as much as I love the managers, nothing personal, they are typically not ready to have all of these ducks in a row, right? And it's a lot of work. Again, it's setting up a foundation that you're constantly building on consistently, right? And so things take you away from building, because your everyday work environment can be a distraction in itself. So having that one person, someone who's focused on making sure they're developing culture, developing systems, is really helpful. But unfortunately, some organizations don't have that person, and it shows.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's a work we all have to do. And James, we talked about engagement before. And I'd like to just move back up the chain, if I could, and just ask you this question. Is recruiting still a priority? We hear about these jobs and job losses and things like that, but is recruiting still a priority for employers? I have my points of view on it, but would love to hear yours.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm interested to hear yours as well. But so people are hiring, right? Like, people still need to hire and replace people, and they're making that investment, and you still have to make sure that you hire the correct people. So I absolutely would say, is it still a priority? Yes. Is it, the war for talent is still a real thing. Even with our unemployment not at 3.5, 4, like it had been pretty steady for a while, but people are hiring, and HR is actually being asked to do more. So we need to use technology in order for them to optimize their hiring processes, because they're being spread too thin. But also, how can that technology ensure that they get the right person? Because ultimately, the longer you have someone not filling a gap, you're hurting engagement of the workforce, picking up the slack, and there's actually money associated to that, right? So I still think it is a priority, maybe not as high, but we're just putting more and more on top of HR. They need to use technology to be more productive. And just to throw out some numbers, right? Like, ZipRecruiter, I believe, has 7 million open positions on it right now. I read an article the other day about 1 million women that had to leave the workforce because they have to stay home and virtually teach their kids, right? So I think it will be interesting as we come out of this to see what actually happens to the unemployment rate when hospitality opens back up and these 1 million women rejoin the workforce because they can now. They literally can't work because they have to take care of their children. And so it's not just women, it's a lot of people out there. So yes is my short answer. I still think it is a priority. They just have to be smarter.
Yeah. I think you're asking me.
Go ahead, Thela.
Yeah,
you want to jump
sure.
in there and jump in on that? Because I think, just really quickly, I think organizations always need to be recruiting, whether it's from the outside or whether it's keeping people. Organizations always need to be recruiting, and probably now more than ever. But Thela, I'd love your thoughts.
Sure. So I agree. James is absolutely right. According to a recent SHRM article, recruiting has not stopped, right? It's just more opportunities. Companies who normally would be hiring on the East Coast, they can hire nationwide, right? You can work anywhere. And so there's a larger applicant pool of people who can be more flexible, and companies are more flexible. For example, call centers, you think about call centers, there's now a demand for more call center operators to customer service reps to work all of these call centers. We're calling on our, different virtual issues that we have while we're at home, and who's answering the phone? These call center reps. And like you said, HR they're asking us more questions about how to fix really troublesome issues around people in the workplace, outside of the workplace. Recently, we had to deal with how FFCRA and rules and laws and regulations apply. And HR people had to learn this really quickly in a fast-moving environment and then apply it. And we're still applying that along with other legislation. So there's just more work. There's more things to do. And I want to mention the inclusion and diversity space has opened wide up because of our recent racial unrest in our country and conversations around social justice and equity and inclusion. So now we have these IND roles, diversity and inclusion roles, people focus on equity, people expanding their organizations, expanding their HR departments. I mean, there's all of these open opportunities that have opened up, unfortunately, due to the pandemic and just our world right now. And I had an example I wanted to share about just the creativity. Some organizations are setting up kiosks outside in their parking lots and in front of their buildings just to have people fill out the I-9 forms and fill out mandatory information, right? So it's like a chain, a new chain of people applying for jobs in a more creative way. So nothing has stopped. It's just organizations have had to get more creative. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And when we think about recruiting, the next thing it leads us to is, as people are going to be coming into the workforce, one of the key concerns is safety. And we might be recruiting people just to work from home, but, there is going to be a time where we have to think about safety, in lots of different ways. So I would love to hear, maybe Thela, we start with you on just some of the things that you're thinking about when it comes to safety in the workplace. And how how any kind of tools and processes can help with that.
Sure. So this comes up a lot again with our clients, and at least every day we're dealing with how to handle COVID testing, COVID contact tracing. And so again, I'm really Paychex proud to say was fascinated with how quickly we responded to the current issues, within organizations. And we've always had Paychex Flex as one of the products, and it's a cloud-based HR technology platform. But on that platform, again, it's always been there, but you have the leave tracking. And that's extremely important because we have people going in and out using EPSL, EFMLA, FMLA, PSL, PGLA. How do you keep track of all of that? And so we have that leave tracking software. And then James may be able to speak about this more, but we also have a partnership with another vendor where we can, and this is just amazing, how we can allow our clients to participate in COVID-19 screening. So we have a safe platform where they can work with us to make sure they have a platform working with our vendor, partnering with our vendor to conduct screening, because there's so many laws and regulations around how to do the screening, the consistency that needs to happen when doing the screening. And then James had kind of mentioned it before, the attestations of certain documents. And so we do have, and I'll let him talk more about that part, but we do have some software that helps with that attestation when you're doing health attestation support, information from employees. So there's a plethora, there really is. There's a lot of information that we can look at to make sure employees are safe. Don't forget about OSHA. We still have tools from OSHA, and we have lots of resources, documentation. We have checklists. We have just a ton of information just on the Paychex site, but also HR in our toolbox. We have a lot of strategies to really walk employees and employers through next steps while they're dealing with the pandemic and just how to think about it. And number one, I just want to leave with, just for anyone listening, we just really encourage employers to be flexible during this time. This is a very stressful time. And if employees can work from home, then let's look at ways they can work from home using the software, using the technology. And I know previously there were some questions about trust, and maybe we'll talk about it later. But those are some things that your HR consultant or your HR business people can talk about. Like, what is it that will help us trust our employees so we can be more flexible? So I had a lot to share about that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And James, what are your thoughts on that? I'd love to, the whole concept of safety is key. And, it's not just knowing who we are, but it's really thinking about, how do we bring the workers back into work in the right way? So love your thoughts on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, number one, I think, like you said, they have to be flexible and they have to understand their workforce. So when to bring them back is going to be delicate. There's going to be people that are absolutely fine with it. There's going to be people that don't ever want to come back, more, maybe not even from a safety perspective, but they just got comfortable for working at home. But then ultimately, it is the employer's responsibility to keep their workforce safe from each other, and also safe from customers if it's if they're interacting with other individuals. So, you touched on a few to expand a little bit, from like a time perspective, you're seeing some trends with like thermal scans at entry, right, to take a fever, iris scan, so that you're not interacting with anything, putting up plexiglass. There's a lot of employers are implementing that for their on-prem workforce. Thing is, that's great, but is a thermal scanner going to stop asymptomatic spread? It's really not going to. We've had some customers actually implement the COVID screening and stop local transmission within their organization, and allow them to control it, do the contact tracing, isolate the affected individuals, and reopen their business much sooner than they would if they didn't have the testing. It was also reactive. So asymptomatic testing is a lot of what I've been looking into to some extent, and that's basically doing pooled testing. So ultimately, if you want to stay open, you want to close the threat of asymptomatic transmission within your business or for your customers, you have to test regularly. That's it. Like, you have to test I think it's like once a week, you can stop it to some percentage, but really if you tested your workforce 3 times a week, you're going to stop all local transmission of COVID-19. And they can do this by, I'm sure we all heard on the news about, Arizona. Well, they still have delays, being 14-day delays, right, on tests. But they've gotten creative. You hear about universities testing wastewater, right? And so they can identify a dormitory that someone tested positive, and they're going to test everybody. But there's asymptomatic testing, which is that available to employers, where they can do pooled testing. So if you had 100 individuals that work for you, you'd be able to take samples of all 100. They would combine them and pool them into a single sample, test it. Let's just say 20. If it's positive, they test all 20. If it's negative, they move on to the next batch of 20, right? So this is a way that they can increase asymptomatic testing and improve turnaround time so that you can completely stop the spread. So, obviously that comes with a cost to some extent, but to me, that is probably the ultimate. If you're returning to work and we're still in the middle of a pandemic, that is probably the most safe work environment that could possibly be, is if you test regularly. Through assurance testing. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great advice. Thank you guys for sharing that. So that was a great conversation. We're already at the bottom of the hour, which is a half hour. That half hour flew by. But Thela, I wanted to thank you very much, and James, I wanted to thank you very much. Any closing comments either one of you wanted to make?
Well, I'll go first. I think flexibility, again, I just want to highlight that. And this is an opportunity for employers to really step out and be different, right? To be leaders in the organization. And it's a great opportunity, especially for HR professionals and business operation leaders, to use these tools and shine and stand out. I'm just trying to say stand out in their organization by using technology to survive these times. So that's all I want to say.
James, thank you, Thela. James?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to echo the same thing, right? On our survey, we saw that the number one investment employers are going to make is in technology, and then followed by, benefits and culture and engagement, right? But technology can drive all 3 of those things. So there's a reason is that people are now understanding the value, like the true value of HR technology. So that investment is ultimately going to have a return on that investment in the near term and the long term, and make your life simpler, but also drive engagement. Ultimately, HR technology, you hear people say HR is the backbone of employers, right? And now this technology is going to really enable people to be stronger in whatever business they do. So it'll help them grow in different ways. So adopt technology.
Yeah, great point, James. Thank you for bringing that up. James and Thela, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it. HR executive, thank you so much for hosting us. I hope this was helpful for those watching, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Thank you.